New Zealand is increasing its humanitarian, legal and economic aid to war-torn Ukraine. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins announced a range of measures last night, including deploying more New Zealand Defence Force troops to help train Ukraine's soldiers. It's part of an international response, but our next guest says it shows where our allies are. So for more, we're joined by international geopolitical analyst Geoffrey Miller. Good morning, Geoffrey. Thank you so much for getting up so early. You're joining us from Australia this morning, and we really appreciate your time. Give us a bit of a lay of the land as things stand, Geoffrey. Where are we at in terms of this conflict at the moment?
Good morning, Matty. Well, we're waiting really for Ukraine's counteroffensive. This has been talked about now for some time, Ukraine's spring counteroffensive. And I think we're seeing the beginnings of that already. It's coming in different ways. Ukraine has become a lot bolder with carrying out attacks inside Russia on Russian fuel depots, Russian trains, for example. So I think we're already beginning to see the beginnings of a spring counteroffensive. And then you've got this supposed drone attack on the Kremlin overnight. Now, Ukraine has denied that it's conducted this. You would probably expect them to do that. Vladimir Zelensky's been in Finland, and he's denied that Ukraine is behind that. And it may well be turn out to be a false flag operation by the Russian side. We've seen many examples of this in the past, and it might be a pretext for Russia to escalate its own attacks on Ukraine. And Russia, of course, has been continuing to carry out drone and missile attacks on Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv. We've had a third night of attacks on the capital. Most of those have been thwarted by Ukrainian missile defense systems. So, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. And, sadly, this conflict in Ukraine is going to drag on for some time yet, and there's going to be a considerable loss of life to come this year.
Although you talk about that boldness, Geoffrey, where does that come from? Does that come from the fact that that Ukraine feels bolstered by the international community?
To some extent, yes. Of course, Western countries have sent a lot of support to Ukraine over the past year, but particularly the last 6 months. If you go look at the US, for example, they're sending in the Abrams tanks. The EU countries have sent in the Leopard tanks, particularly the likes of Germany. There was a big debate there over the European winter about sending tanks to Ukraine in preparation for a counteroffensive. The two sides, Russia and Ukraine, have pretty much been in a stalemate situation of some kind since, September, October last year. Remember, Ukraine made some big gains around that time in the northeast of Ukraine, in particular, also in the south to some degree. But since then, it's been a bit more of the old stalemate situation that we had, and you've seen that fighting around that city of Bakhmut, for example, where both sides just have really dug their heels in and have fought a battle of attrition, really. So I think both sides are trying to suddenly create a breakthrough, and that warmer weather does provide the opportunity to try and do that.
You mentioned things might get worse before they get better, and you also mentioned the alleged drone attack that Russia is adamant was brought upon by Ukraine. That Russia has said that it will retaliate as a response. Is there concern around what that retaliation might look like, Geoffrey?
Well, I mean, we're already seeing nightly Russian missile attacks on Ukrainian cities and drone attacks. I'm not sure what more Russia can do. Is this a pretext for trying to kill Volodymyr Zelensky? I mean, possibly, but you think that Russia would be trying that kind of thing anyway. I mean, they've certainly tried that before. So I'm not sure whether Russia needs a pretext. I mean, this might be aimed really at domestic audiences inside Russia and trying to shore up support there. If you show footage of an alleged attack on the Kremlin, on the president's offices, effectively, you're creating some you're creating some reasons to get the population behind you. And we're coming up to the 9th of May, which is Victory Day in Russia, which is a huge day in Russia where you have the military parades on Red Square, and it's a very symbolic day. And having this kind of thing happen, 5 days out might be useful, 5 or 6 days out from that 9th of May date. And it might be useful to galvanize public support inside Russia, potentially.
All right, let's have a look at what the Prime Minister has announced and pledged when visiting these Ukrainian soldiers in the UK. He's said he'll extend that training deployment of 95 New Zealand Defence Force personnel. He's included money, $2 million to the Ukrainian Humanitarian Fund, $500,000 towards the New Zealand Disaster Response Partnership. Is this seen as significant in terms of what New Zealand can offer?
Yeah, I mean it's another contribution. I was expecting a little bit more, to be honest, Matty. Given the way that New Zealand's foreign policy has been going since Chris Hipkins took over, we've gone in a more hawkish direction. I think we've become more aligned with our partners like Australia, the United States. So there's talk of New Zealand joining AUKUS now. We're ramping up our military spending. We're expecting an announcement of that soon in the coming weeks. So I was actually expecting more lethal aid, more weapons for Ukraine. We've already gone there before. In April last year, New Zealand sent $7.5 million we sent that money to the United Kingdom to purchase weapons for Ukraine. And I was expecting another contribution like that. Instead, this is training, essentially 120 New Zealand Defence Force personnel, 95. It was 120 last year. 95 now is the current figure, and that's been extended for another year, that deployment. And then, there's some other sums, as you mentioned, for humanitarian assistance, particularly, which is useful, no doubt. So, this is a useful contribution. We're still well behind the likes of Australia or Canada, for example, in the amount of support that we provide to Ukraine. I think there will be some pressure being applied behind the scenes to New Zealand to do more. This might be just another contribution. We might expect more contributions to be forthcoming, given the way New Zealand's foreign policy is heading at the moment.
Jeffrey, thank you for your insight this morning and for your time as well. That's Jeffrey Miller, an international geopolitical analyst, joining us from Australia. Thank you so much.